James here with Rewind Electric. Been getting a lot of questions about how to reverse the phase relationship between pickups. Magnet flipping, how do you do it? Electrically, does it make a difference? So I'm going to bang this out real quick. It's not actually that complex of a topic when we're talking specifically about a couple pickups. So I'm going to go over to the bench here, got some examples, and we're going to go over that. Okay, here we go. We're going to use the P90s as an example. I might have look, got a pickup here I can use for a humbucker example too. There's two ways to do it: electrically, magnetically. Does it sound different if you do one over the other? Not unless you're doing something weird. Not really, not unless you have some unusual type of setup of a guitar. If we're talking about just a Les Paul or a Telecaster here, something normal, no, they sound the same. We have done extensive tests on that, and we're not alone in that. And yeah, so that'll be that. How do you do it? Well, first of all, you only want to mess with one pickup, because if you reverse, we can sometimes use phase and polarity interchangeably here. I'm going to try to refer to polarity as either being magnetic polarity or polarity relationship between the two pickups. You'll see why they're somewhat interchangeable during this conversation. It's not even really necessary to be super clear on what the differences are for the sake of adjusting your pickups. But you want to change only one. If you're trying to make the middle position sound either in phase or out of phase, basically you're trying to switch it from whatever it is now to whatever the other one is that you want it to be, you're only going to change one. Because if you change one and then you change another, well, okay, now they're both in the same relationship as each other again. You're not getting anywhere. You really only want to change one. Pardon me. Similar to electrically versus magnetically, you only want to change one pickup either electrically or magnetically, but not both. Reason being is, so you change one electrically, okay, then you change it magnetically. Now you're back where you started. Now, don't let me rotating these give you any misinterpretation that flipping the pickup over might somehow change the phase relationship. I assure you it will not. If you turn a clock over on the wall, time doesn't run backwards. That's not how things work. Okay. So, the first way that you can change your phase relationship between two pickups is to take one. It doesn't matter at all which one, either one that you can get to more easily. And in the example of the P90, you have the start and the finish. Actually, this is the start and this is the finish, but it doesn't really matter. You have these two black wires. One is the start and one's the finish coming off of the coil. One's going to ground, one's going to hot. You would disconnect them and reverse them, and you're done. Now, if your guitar was out of phase in the middle position before, it is now in phase in the middle position. If it was in phase in the middle position before, it is now out of phase in the middle position. And you're done. Okay? The other way you could do it, and this is the way you would do it if you don't solder. By the way, please learn to solder. If you're a guitarist messing around with pickups and electronics, it will benefit you hugely in the long run. But also, if you have a vintage pickup. In the case of these here, we've got my 1952 P90s. These are not vintage pickups. Wouldn't matter if we soldered or unsoldered these at all. But if you have a vintage pickup and you don't want to disturb a solder connection, you can do it by flipping the magnets. Now, as you'll see here in this P90, there's two magnets. I have a little checker here that tells you which side is north and which side is south. I also have my magnets marked. You see these black lines on the north side, and as you'll see here, white equals north, black equals south on this tester. So outside is north facing, outside is north facing on the other one as well. Okay, south is facing in towards the keeper bar, which is this steel bar you can see there. Let me use my pointer here. This steel bar in between the magnets there that you can see is what's called a keeper bar, called a pole shoe too. Both are somewhat correct, and neither one's entirely correct. But this is music terminology, where we talk about vibratos and tremolos, and none of that terminology is right. Okay? Input jacks and output jacks. Anyway, keeper bar. South on these magnets is the side touching the keeper bar on both of them. So what does that do to the screws, the pole screws? Well, that makes them south. So if the top of the pole screws is south, what do you suppose the bottom is? Well, it's also south, because those magnets are facing in, and north is out here. Remember, north is facing out. Okay. Again, you don't really need to know this to get the phase relationship switched. Okay, so to get these magnets out, now on some P90s, including vintage, they may come out very easily because Gibson didn't have a really excellent method for securing them in there. I can get these out like that, but another way that you might get them out if you're having trouble is to just loosen these two screws here, and they might be Phillips, depending what year of P90 you have, or what model from me you have, or what the person who put it together at Gibson had in his hand that day. Okay, so we just loosen them, maybe a half turn each. And at that point, see, my pole screws are threaded in, so they're still a little bit more firm. You can get them out. So let me just put this right back to where it was, exactly the way it was, so that I can demonstrate this slowly. When you flip a magnet in a P90, let me show you some things here. Okay, watch how this comes out. Pay attention. You are not flipping it this way, because see, north is still outside. You can flip it in circles this way all day long, and it does absolutely nothing to the polarity or the sound. You want to flip it like an axle rotates this way. You see now, no marking here, that north side of the magnet with the markings is now the side touching the keeper bar. So you flip it this way. Okay, that's how you do it. Now, could you also flip it this way? Sure, does the same thing. Doesn't matter. But what does absolutely nothing is if you flip it this way. That just goes nowhere. You see that marked side, north, right there. Stays outside no matter how many times you turn it, okay? So you flip it this way. And you put it back in. And you hold it, because these magnets are facing south to south, which means they want to repel away from each other. So they don't want to, they're not going to magnetically stick on there very well. They will ever so slightly, because physics, but they kind of want to repel, okay? So the other magnet now, we're going to take that out, and we're going to flip it this way, like an axle rotates, and pop it right back in. Okay, now you want to make sure that those are in nice and flush, so there's nothing sticking out here to prevent the cover from going on or from this going in the route of the guitar. Okay, you also want to make sure that it's relatively centered back and forth. It's not super critical that it be exactly centered, but you want it roughly centered. And then you're going to give these little guys here a turn back down. Now on a vintage P90 or on a rewind electric P90, you'll notice that there's a lock washer under those screws. I'll show you one here that's not installed, a couple of them. Okay, those are split lock washers, and so that's going to help hold that tension firm on there when the screws are tightened down. You don't need to crank them down, and you don't want to crank them down, especially on a vintage P90, because these polystyrene bobbins are pretty fragile and they crack, and the design of the pickup is such that these two screws that hold the bobbin down are pulling down in the center while the magnets are pushing up on the sides. So it wants to turn this whole thing into a U or a V, push these flanges up and break them, and that's why you see a lot of lateral cracks down the sides here. You see cracks here. And the original P90s have a slightly different style base plate than what I'm showing you on this one, which has a little dimple in the center, which puts even more pressure there, and it makes the magnets looser. It's absolutely like a worse design for the longevity of the pickup, for microphonics, for a number of reasons. I do have base plates like that, but I don't use them unless I'm doing like a vintage restoration because of problems. Okay, so, well, before I put the cover back on, I'll just show you. You'll notice now there's no markings here because the north sides of the magnet are now contacting that keeper bar. And as such, the outsides of the magnet are south. Okay, so what does that do to our pull screws that were north before, or that were south before? Well, now they're north. And that was the whole idea here, is to change the magnetic polarity. What about the bottom? Yeah, they're still north, because remember, physics. The magnetic, the opposite magnetic pole is on the outside. So the inside is going to be common to both the top and the bottom. That's what matters. All right, cover back on. These nice Rewind Electric butyrate P90 covers with your ever so very little special markings inside. Can you see that there? Just like the originals. Yeah. Nice and squishy. Those aren't going to break on you. Those are soft. Just like the originals. And you know what? They're not pink. They're not green. They're not yellow. And yes, they do smell like old milk. That's a feature, believe it or not. I know that's crazy, but that is a desirable feature. So now with these two pickups, because they were wired electrically and assembled with the magnets facing the same way, and the coils were wound the same way, which is how Gibson did it. No coils were ever wound backwards. No one ever winds coils backwards. When you hear about a reverse wound coil, all somebody's doing is flipping those wires, the start and the finish, like we talked about. It's it would be just bizarre. And most machines, especially vintage machines, aren't even capable of going backwards. And you can put the bobbin on there backwards, but most mounting hardware on machines is designed to mount the bobbin on one way only anyway, including Gibsons and Fenders that they used historically. So now you've got north magnetic polarity here, south magnetic polarity here, and everything is still electrically just like it was. Now, the pickups in this case, because they were built the same and we just flipped the magnets on one, are now going to be out of phase in the middle position. All right. That covers it really for the P90s. Oh, there is one other thing I can mention. I do often get asked, not often, but regularly, you know, does it go this way? Does it go this way? Say your headstock's over here and your bridge is over here. Does it go this way? Does it go this way? It doesn't make a difference. Unless I've built something custom for you, which, you know, I might do. And if I build you something custom that has two different kinds of magnets here, you know, say I've got an A4 and an A5, one side and the other, I might tell you, based on our conversations and why I chose to do that for your design, I might say that in your guitar, this one should be, you know, one way or the other. And what you would have in that case is you'd get this, it'd basically have a little piece of tape on here, just like that, and a little piece of Sharpie that says bridge. And an arrow pointing that way. And that way, you know, when you're putting this in, hey, the bridge is that way, so it goes this way. Not that way, this way, because the bridge is that way. Did I do that right? Yeah, the bridge is that way. Okay, so there we go. That's a rare case. If you don't see something like this and we don't have a conversation about that up front and you're ordering something standard from me, it doesn't matter. The covers can go either way, okay? You can put it on this way and you can turn it and you can put it on this way. Now, these are not detail age covers, but if they were, they may have some more particular wear, including the string shadows, in which case on your low strings, they're going to be a little bit heavier and they get a little bit lighter and thinner as you get to your high strings. You also might have some more palm wear here. You would probably also have some more wear on this area where you're palm muting and pressing the strings down. So the wear of the cover covers might be directional one way or the other, as well as for bridge and neck, okay? But the pickups, you can rotate them around and install them any which way you please, okay? P90s, check. Humbuckers, okay? Let's look at this one here. The magnet, there's only one magnet in a humbucker, first of all. It's right there. Can you reverse the polarity of a humbucker electrically? Yes, you can, but not with a braided shield, unless you get in here under the tape and start messing around with those fine wires that come off the coils, in which case I would recommend you not do that. Like, if you're asking this question, can you reverse the polarity here? Don't open your tape up. You are probably just better off doing it with the magnet, because it's less invasive. And the result is exactly the same. Now, similar to P90s, you have two humbuckers and a guitar. Let's bring this other guy here over, even though it's a different kind of pickup. We'll do a little Van Halen and a little Jimmy Page here tonight. So you only want to reverse if you want to reverse the phase relationship of these two pickups when you're in the middle position to get either that out of phase sound, or if you have two pickups that are out of phase with each other and you want to put them back in phase in the middle position, you only mess with one. So, and you, same as with the P90s, you would only do it electrically or magnetically. In the case of humbuckers, you're almost always doing it magnetically, unless you have 4-conductor wiring, which I may have a sample of a piece here. Let's see. Yeah, but it's going to be a little bit hard to see. I don't know if the camera's going to focus on that, but there are multiple conductors in there, in which case each coil has a separate start and finish, just like that one P90 coil did, and then you also get an independent ground and shield. So if you have 4-conductor wiring, you probably bought it for that reason, and you know why you have it, and you know what to do, and you can do your phase reversal electrically that way. If you do not, this is what we do. We flip the magnet just exactly the same as we did with the 2 magnets in the P90, only there's just 1 magnet in the humbucker. So, okay, I've got slotted screws on this guy too. We're gonna back these screws out a little bit. Now, the magnets in my humbuckers, they can be in there pretty good, because each of these screws is threaded, these are threaded, these are threaded, and I make sure that stuff gets tightened down fairly well, because they're not potted. The PAFs aren't, at least by default, and I don't want them feeding back on people unnecessarily. I mean, nice musical feedback is glorious, but we don't want unmusical squeal. Now, you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to try to grab that magnet with the end of these serrated edge pliers. Now, I mean, this is basically iron, and these are hardened steel, so it's going to want to slip off, and I'm grabbing it in a bad way. But let's try. Aha! Okay. That was easy. It did actually come out. If you didn't have such luck, you might find yourself, and I'll just do it here, having to back these pole screws out past the base plate. These are my chrome T-top screws. You don't see a lot of people doing that. See, that's nickel. See how this has a yellowish tint? This is very silvery and almost blue. Yeah. These are correct. The head shape is also different. Can I show you that too while we're in here? Look at that. Why is the head shape different? Because the originals were, and that matters to me. And that matters to you too. Probably. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you don't care about the head shape, but I bet you care about the sound. And every little thing counts, and that plays into it. So, back on track here. If you weren't able to get the magnet out easily that way, you might have to back all 6 of these pole screws out, just, to the point where they pass through this base plate. You don't have to take them out all the way. And then you would do the same thing by loosening these brass screws on this side, say a 1/4 turn or a 1/2 turn. And what that's going to do is release the pressure on this bobbin. Because if loosening these brass screws doesn't do it for you, that means that loosening the tension that this bobbin was pressing down on the magnet wasn't enough to get it out. So you're going to have to loosen the tension on this bobbin as well. This one being the more difficult one. But try here first, because that's often all you need to do. Okay? So, whichever way you've done that, let me put this guy back in. Don't use a power drill. I've been doing this for 12 years. That's a specific bit and a specific drill. And I'm willing to pay the price for any slip-ups that I may have. Use a screwdriver like this. God, you don't have one like this either. This is also a custom screwdriver that I ground down to fit PAF screws. But do your best, okay? Use one that's going to fit the screw and not slip. And if you have Gibson humbuckers, Lord help you, because there are no screwdrivers that fit those well. Those things are terrible shaped screws. They're like cast or pressed or something. The slots are just awful. They don't hold a driver. Yeah, be very careful with those because it's going to want to slip. All right, let's get back to our phase reversal here. Polarity reversal of the magnet. Okay, remember on the P90, the south side of the magnet was contacting the keeper bar and making the screws south. That's absolutely no different. Gibson did not change that when they went to humbuckers. The north side of the magnet on the P90 was facing outward into space. Just nothing. Now the north side of the magnet is contacting the slugs. See those little shiny, that's the bottom of these metal pieces here of the slug coil. Hence its name, the slug coil, right? So what we're going to do, just like we did in the P90, only there's only one magnet. We're going to rotate it like an axle. We got to get it out first. Okay. And we're going to rotate it like an axle. So now the marked side, oh, well, it's not marked, sorry, but let me just mark it that way as we go through the demonstration. Okay. I can go through what these codes mean on your magnets that you may get from me at some point in a future video. I'll just say that this one says RWSA5, and that simply stands for Rewind Electric Short A5, because that's what this is. All right. You can pretend that was on there already, because if you buy a pickup from me, it should be. At least it'll have a little mark like that, if nothing else. So we're taking it out, north side. Gosh, I hope I wrote that on the right side. Yes, I did. Okay. North side is facing the slugs, and we're going to rotate it like an axle. So the north side is now facing the screws, and slide that guy right back in. Now, I do this subconsciously because I've done it so much. I have my finger just lightly kind of touching this tape. Under this tape is the ends of these wires and solder joints tied together. You don't want to shove this through so much that it pokes all that out and then you can't get your cover on, okay? So I have my finger here, and that way I know when I slide this in if I've gone too far. Now this is a short magnet, so I can tell you that it's not until right there I feel it now. And that is in there pretty far, okay? And that's just fine. It doesn't matter if it's absolutely centered. It doesn't matter at all. You just don't want it hanging out over the edge to where you can't get the cover on. And then we're going to tighten these screws down. And now we have north polarity on the screw coil and south polarity on the slug coil. And we have just successfully changed the phase relationship between these two pickups in your guitar. So if they were in phase before, in the middle position, now the middle position will be out of phase. If they were out of phase before in the middle position, now the middle position will be in phase. Now, what would have happened if we did this one instead? What would be different? Nothing. What would have happened if we did it electrically instead of magnetically on one of these pickups? Nothing. It would, the result would be the same. And when I say nothing would happen if we had done this one, I mean nothing different would have happened. You would get the same result. You just want to do it on one or the other, not both. If you do it on both, you're just flipping a coin and then flipping it over again. You haven't changed the face of the coin. You haven't changed the magnetic polarity in this case. Okay, I think that's it. So, all right, guys. I hope that made sense. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask. If there's any suggestions, or you want to spread some misinformation and tell me I'm wrong, that if doing it electrically sounds so much different because the magnets are pulling on the strings differently, like go ahead and you can please post a video showing us and giving some detail proving that that's the case, because I've done that research and I'm confident enough to say that it's not, as have my colleagues in this field who have also done that research and confidently said it's not. So I'm open to being proven wrong, but you're gonna have to prove it, not just tell me. Okay, and that's cool. And if I'm wrong, man, let's do it. Let's do that experiment together here and show everybody. Okay. All right, folks. Have a good night.